Now, you may have heard that the jab is the most important punch in boxing, and it is, but only if you know the different ways in which you can throw it and the different uses. We're going to look at some of those in today's video. The first kind of jab we're going to look at is the power jab. Now, I can't remember where I learned this trick from, but by kicking the elbow out ever so slightly, you'll notice the difference when you connect with the bag with your power jab. Let me show you what that looks like. So a regular jab, my elbows would be tucked in to protect the body. With a power jab, I'm going to kick it out ever so slightly, and then I'm going to extend forward from there. So I'm kicking that elbow out slightly. The next jab we're going to look at is the flicker jab. Now, Tyson Fury uses this quite extensively. You probably have also seen the videos where they're questioning whether or not his knuckle is resting at the end of the glove. The reason why is because you're not going to tighten your fist. This is going to give you a little bit extra range of motion compared to if you were. The aim isn't to hurt the opponent, it's just to keep something in their face, keep them thinking about something, and keep them mentally busy. You can use this while moving around your opponent. It's not designed to be a power shot. The aim is just to keep the opponent occupied or keep the punching lane occupied. Now, this is also a good jab to use in technical sparring or with beginners when you've got someone who is, for example, mismatched in terms of experience. The power isn't there, but the mechanics, wow, that's annoying. But the mechanics of throwing the shot are. Now, the next jab we're going to look at was introduced to me by Ben Robertson of Flowbox, and that is the swivel jab. This is a useful jab to use when it comes to generating more power. Sometimes it's a little bit slower. The key technique points we're going to be looking at is you're going to be taking the distance between your shoulder and hip and increasing them. So for example, if I was to throw what's called the swivel jab, I'd be in my stance. I deliberately create a bigger distance. So for example, it works well after a cross. And then from there, I'm going to be twisting all of this back to throw the jab. Manny Pacquiao did this in many of his fights, throwing a 1-2-1, and you'll notice that it does contain the power to knock somebody down. Again, credit to Flowbox and Ben Robertson. So I'm deliberately going to take my shoulder, my rear shoulder, and turn it. So now I'm loading this front leg pretty similar to how I would be if I'd thrown the right hand and I was getting ready to come back with the hook. But instead of coming back with the hook, which my opponent might be expecting, I'm going to load that front leg and I'm going to throw my jab. Again, this might require me to change my head slot a little bit, so it might even come off of a slip or a right hand, or even a feint with the right hand. This front leg is loaded, and then transfer that weight back across to throw that jab. The next kind of jab we're going to look at is something called a screw shot. This is great for against those fighters that present a very small target or typical high guard fighters. The angle of the glove is what's going to allow this type of jab to screw up and through. Now with this shot, it's going to look like a normal jab right into the last second. Again, I might change my head slot a little bit to get a bit more power. So if this is the center line, I'm going to take my head off of that center line. I'm going to be throwing that jab, and at the last second, it's going to extend up. Some people like to think of it as a long range uppercut, but at the last second, that glove turns up to present a different angle. The final jab we're going to look at is the pecking jab. Caleb Plant is a big proponent of this type of jab, and all it is, imagine you're just knocking at the door. I quite like Gary Vaynerchuk's book, Jab, 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 Right Hook, and that's almost how I imagine this. It's just pecking, it's just poking, almost probing and annoying your opponent rather than doing any damage, but it is something that keeps them from, or forces them to reset. The next jab we're going to look at is the jab to the body or the jab to the chest. This is a particularly useful jab variation when, again, you've got high guard type of fire or pressure type of fire. They might walk forward and take shots on the gloves, but usually there's a gap downstairs. And even if there isn't, the reason why this jab is so successful is it's very easy to feint your way into it. It's very easy to avoid a counter punch from your opponent because you change your head slot. So for example, if I'm stood here, when I throw my normal jab, my head might stay on the center line, or it might come off the center line slightly. But my jab to the body puts my head in a head slot that is very difficult to reach with a traditional punch. You'd be coming quite wide with quite an unorthodox or a swooping right hook, but it's also quite a good shot to land as you move away from your opponent. So my standard jab to the body, it looks like I'm coming to the head, and then I'm level changing to land that shot, ideally in the pit of the stomach. Where this also works quite well is feints to the head. So I can either feint with my hand and then drop down. I can either do a one feint that Usyk favors quite a lot and then drop it down. I can feint with my head. I can feint with a level change. My favorite is a quick feint upstairs, especially after you've hit a hard jab, and then throwing down to the stomach. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is the area that we're jabbing to. So we practice jabbing to the stomach. What we can also do is jab to the glove of the opponent. What this forces an opponent to do is get a false sense of confidence. They think that they're catching the jab really nicely, but actually what you're doing is occupying this glove or this rear hand so they can't fire back with it. When you've occupied it enough and they get that false sense of confidence, you can then either bring your jab through the middle, you can come with a screw shot to change the angle, or you can use the fact that you're getting them comfortable moving their hand and then come around the guard with a cheeky little long range hook. So if I was to practice that on the bag, I might throw a throwaway jab around the bag because that would be in line with the opponent's glove. And then once I've thrown a few around the outside of the bag, I'm then going to stab one up the center. I might even then feint round the side and then come to the center. Equally, by changing levels on the jab and firing the jab to the chest of an opponent is also great if you've got one of those boxers that is slick, likes to move their head a lot. Sticking to the chest then allows you to make contact with other types of punches. By first being able to make contact, whether it's the chest, the shoulder, the hand, you can then sneak your way forward to being able to land more meaningful shots. The other way I like to use this is to jab towards the head, the chin, then subtly towards the top part of the chest. And what this does with certain types of boxers is they start to reach with that hand that's parrying. Then what we can do, once we've jabbed to the head, jabbed to the chest, we can start feinting and then coming round the side. So as that person reaches with their hand to block it, we're basically coming around that guard and towards the exposed area. This is what that would look like. So I'm going to feint here, drop my weight slightly, and then come round the side. Then we can begin to mix up jabs down the middle. We can even go for a double jab, where the second jab comes around the side. So whilst they might catch the jab here, this is leaving the rest of the face exposed. And this sets up the right hand nicely, especially if we started to move with it. So I've jabbed here, I've stepped to readjust my angle ever so slightly to come around with that long lead hook, and then that backhand. Also then sets up a right hand through the middle. This is one of my favorite combinations, especially against southpaws, because not only have you got your right hand off, but you've moved subtly so that you're now in that outside foot position that some coaches think is overrated, but it's positioning yourself in a position where it's easier for you to hit than get hit. The next thing we're going to talk about is jab defense. Now, most people, when they're doing jab only rounds, yes, they might think about, oh, this is all I can use. They don't think about changing, for example, the tempo, so the difference between throwing a probing jab and then mixing it up. Changing the speed, for example, by kicking that elbow out or rotating the shoulder. But they don't talk about defending the jab. So when we're shadowboxing our jab only rounds, we should be used to catching the jab, whether it's southpaw, whether it's orthodox. We should get used to changing our head slots. We should get used to disengaging with the feet. We should get used to, for example, if this person's jabbing at me, I'm pulling back from the jab, I'm pulling back, changing my head slots, I'm disengaging. All of these things should come from our jab round. So as we're boxing and using our jab only round, we're also going to defend ourselves from oncoming jabs. If we're just doing jab defense and jab rounds, then we're not necessarily putting counters together. But the reason why we slip punches, the reason why we move away, is to put ourselves in better positions, not simply just to run or get out of the firing line. So I'm going to catch the jab, return fire, lift the jab, return fire. I'm going to throw to the head, stick to the body. I'm going to change up the speed and the tempo. So there's my flicker jab, nice short range. Then I'm going to kick my elbow out, stab with the jab. I'm going to try not to make a conscious effort. I'm going to try and make a conscious effort not to always step forward with this foot. I actually want to bring my base with me. I might throw my swivel jab or a long hook. And I'm catching the jab as I'm moving. I'm changing my head slots. I might put traffic in the way to stop the opponent from punching. And then maybe I've tracks in the jabs on the other hand. Giving them different looks. Hitting different areas. I'm going back. I'm going body. Chest and head. Different angles. Little head feint, little foot feint, disengage, walk backwards, shuffling. Blind them with the jab. Jab, push away, jab. Catch them on the end of the jab. Jab moving in different directions. Catch the jab. Catch it on the backhand. Catch it on the lead hand. Feinting with the right hand. Giving them different looks. Using different parts of my feet. Putting it on different weight. Feint to the body. Feint to the body. Circling with my hand. Moving with my feet. You get the idea. If you learned something, follow the fighter's thread. Share this video with somebody you might think finds it useful.